Hello and welcome. It's Downbelow RPG. I'm Ian.
I'm Steve.
And today we are continuing to design the Biodynamics Adventure Module 2, which is something in the soda. We don't really have a name, but that's the working concept, and we need to get some connective tissue, some directions the investigation can go.
So this is going to be a little different than simply running scene by scene by scene. Instead of talking on a specific scene for about 5 minutes, what we're going to do is I am going to detail some directions that the investigation could take and some information that could be found out. And then in the next episode, we're going to flip over to Ian, who's going to talk about the kind of successes necessary and for alternative connective tissue scenes like this, things like a tracker was mentioned last time. Stuff like the total number of successes needed to move on to the next connective tissue part, or possibly even the total number of successes needed to move on to the final scene.
Especially if running this not as a one-session wonder, but as something that you sprinkle in throughout a longer campaign, which in this particular story's case is very possible.
So let's start with the basics. The basics is the question of why are these people acting this way? Why are they acting the way they are?
Because the players don't have any way of figuring out that it's in the soda. I mean, chemically, this is something that we've said. It doesn't leave obvious traces.
Right. It's one thing that once you know what you're testing for, you can test for it. Similar to how if someone is on strong antidepressants and you know that you are testing for that, you can find chemical traces in the body, but you wouldn't necessarily spot them if you weren't looking for them. People are looking in the hospitals. They are looking for various derivatives. They're looking for meth. They're looking for bath salts. They're looking for other behavior-altering drugs.
But just like blood work won't necessarily show that you're sick because you can't always culture a particular disease out of it because it might not be in that blood that you drew.
Right.
You need to know exactly what you're looking for. Like, so, I know that an elevated level of this.
So there's two directions that are going to come together and be functionally lead you to the same place. You can look at this from the scientific side. If the players have access, training, and means to actually investigate with a full-on blood work, full-on just really delve into the scientific side, they can find that one thing all of these people had in common, whether they are corpses that were brought in for autopsy after being shot in a state of rage, or people who were arrested and had blood work done, eventually they can find out that all of them had certain neurotransmitters in common in an elevated level that is abnormal for their medical history. And there is neither a record of them having issues with that in the past, nor a record of them being on treatment that would have done that. Alternately, they could start with the behavioral patterns, looking at what do these people do, what do these people have in common.
This is more likely if they are...
Well, almost anyone else, to be honest.
If they are either professional investigators or somebody who otherwise is a perceptive investigative type.
And indeed, even the blood work angle will eventually lead to what behaviors do these people have in common, which is why I'm going to spend the rest of the episode on that.
Quick question before you go into further on the behaviors. Is there any way, if you've got a group of characters who they aren't really investigators, but they really want to find this out, what are some other ways that they might find some information about this?
Well, there's always the possibility that the characters know investigators who can do this for them.
So through contacts.
Through contacts, there's the possibility that much like the audience in a Sherlock Holmes novel, they are simply along for the ride while these things happen around them. But that's not really... not necessarily ideal unless you are running this as a sort of gradual reveal connective tissue. Again, the last couple episodes, we mentioned that there was the possibility of running this alongside the campaign until something really kicks into high gear.
So this last option only really works if you're doing that.
Right. Because it really assumes that the players are at this point hooked in, and especially if it's happened to one of the players themselves or one of the players' family members or other loved ones, the behavioral investigation becomes much easier, much more straightforward. So simply put, the one thing that everyone affected has in common at this stage is they drink an awful lot of Soda X. The reason that soda was picked is because, unlike fast food, The noble rich do not necessarily eat at McDonald's. So saying that it's in the burgers at fast food joints, for instance, means that there's certain side effects of certain parts of civilization that largely would be unaffected by this.
The idea is it's a consumable that crosses demographics.
Crosses demographics and is readily available at street-side vending machines or wherever you would want it. So this soda has basically the following side effects. First, it's addictive. It's more addictive than straight-up sugar and caffeine because your body becomes quickly acclimated to the neurotransmitters that are in that drink once it ingests the drugs that force you to produce them. So you get physically addicted to it, and then it starts modifying your behavior. You become much more prone to irrational fits of anger, losing control, and lashing out while the heightened neurotransmitters are in effect. Everyone that is affected has that. This is again, if the player is affected, well, ideally the player already had a soda habit, but so it should be a little bit difficult to track down exactly where it went wrong. This is really mostly so that the players who are affected have a reason to reach out to other people instead of just sitting there and analyzing themselves into oblivion.
So I have two questions before we cut this segment.
Yes.
That will help with figuring out what direction the GM will go with this.
Okay.
Question one. How does this link back to biodynamics? Do they make the soda themselves, or do they just make some of the chemicals and they slipped their marker in?
Long story short, this clue itself does not immediately lead back to biodynamics. It will eventually lead back to biodynamics because through subsidiaries, through partnerships, etc., just like Ian mentioned, the chemicals are getting into the soda on biodynamic say-so further up the chain.
So essentially they own something. They own a company that makes chemicals that are used in producing these drinks, and so they slipped it into that
at some point along
process.
the chain, yes.
So it'll take multiple steps. So question two, what was this chemical originally meant to do other than turning people into rage monsters?
Well, actually, we're going to be getting to that in a little bit, but the short version on that is this chemical is part of a field test of general behavior modifiers. For instance, what if you were to be able to say, come visit Scenic Nuevo Paradiso, it's the happiest place on earth, because it's literally lacing the drinking supply with happiness-inducing neurotransmitters.
Figured I'd set that up right now because knowing behind the scenes as the GM what the intent was can be important for deciding how much of it the players find out at what point. So next time we're going to go over how to reveal what information and how to connect things together with the system. See you then.